Hello and welcome to the Captain's Table, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Bazooka01 Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender here at the Astropub, your space bar at the end of the universe. I am also your professor on the Astro Historian, and of course, your moderator here on the Captain's Table podcast. As just a quick reminder, we do have also the Captain's Table on Spotify. So you can check us out on Spotify or any pod where fine podcasts are available, as well as our new YouTube channel, the Captain's Table Podcast. So at the Captain's Table Podcast, all one word. It'll be in the description below. As we move along and get that channel growing and hopefully get it to the point where it is able to be advertised on by YouTube to help promote it more and get that content flowing, we'll probably eventually move these live streams to there. But until then, it's going to be here at youtube.com/theastropub and twitch.tv/theastropub, which will always be on twitch.tv/theastropub to watch us on Saturdays. So with that all out of the way, let's get started with talking about the main topic. Well, let's introduce people first. So I'm going to start off with the person over here, the very, very finely dressed man with the very nice shirt, Algrid. Who are you, Al? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
Now, Paulie, as you were saying before, this is a wonderful Hearthstonian shirt.
Oh, yes.
So, yes, one-of-a-kind batik shirt because it's made up of different patches of batik. I'm Al Garrett. I'm one of the Infra Runners. I love lore.
Yeah. Also, a member of the On Hiatus Lore Citizen podcast, which we got to bring back.
That's right.
Point, so.
That's right. One of the Lore Citizen podcast folk, with the other esteemed member of our panel here, Jail. So, Jail, who are you?
Yeah, who are you, Jail? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
I'm Jail. I have a YouTube channel, Jail, and I do mostly. I'm mostly known for doing stuff about languages, but I tend to also just make videos about little details in Star Citizen stuff that I find interesting. And I too have fond memories of the Lore Citizen podcast.
We'll get back to it at some point. I'll figure out.
He is also.
Go ahead.
Jail is also a barkeep in his own right. The mixer of Xi'an drinks, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm actually sort of like, I'd be concierge only on prizes won from like cooking contests. If you just had the cash value. And I'm also an owner of a very snazzy shirt with medieval marginalia on the shoulders and
nice.
Even more on the back. So snazzy shirt day, I think.
I like it. Yeah. And last but not least, a new face to the podcast, but not a new to the community. You've been around for a while, I know, right? Mats, who are you? What do you do in Star Citizen? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Mats the Blue Eye. I'm, mostly, most of the time, I'm just a regular player since 2013. So, and I'm following the project like on a technical phase, and I really like the in-depth lore stuff, and I'm trying to start a YouTube channel. I hope I can get it running soon for the German community to get us involved in the lore of Star Citizen a little bit more. So yeah, hope that's coming soon.
Yeah, I did link his YouTube channel in the Discord in the description below for those of you on YouTube. So it's Mats, and just like it's spelled there, MATZE, Blue Eye. So
exactly,
that one. So
that's the main channel. I will link the lore, the dedicated one, as soon as that's up and running.
Okay. So keep an eye out on that one. All right. So today I brought a bunch of lore heads here because we're going to talk about lore. And as I always am going to plug, if you enjoy lore, I do an entire channel that's dedicated to Star Citizen and other space and science fiction lore called The Astro Historian. Go check it out if you haven't already done so. But The big thing that kind of the catalyst for this, someone's echoing a little bit. Who is? I think it's Al. He might be echoing.
I think
a
it
little
will be because the rest of us are on headphones.
bit. Okay, yeah. So just turn down a little bit there, Al. Maybe.
I am on headphones.
Oh, we're all on headphones.
I don't know. I'll keep talking and I'll look for the echo. So the big factor, we had a big factor with Chris Roberts' letter for the chairman, where he kind of laid out what the plans were for 2025. And one of the major things that his plan had to do with stability, content, and narrative. It is Al. It's coming in through Al a little bit. I don't know why.
Okay.
Turn it down a little bit, maybe on your side, just the volume a little bit.
Yep.
So yeah, that is the main thrust, and because the narrative was put front and center by Chris during the letter for the chairman, I felt like it'd probably be a good idea to discuss a little bit about what Star Citizen narrative is, because unless you're someone like myself or Mats or Jail or Al, you probably didn't even know that Star Citizen had story or had like a narrative behind it. And or one of the wonderful folks who've been following lore, like plenty of us have. So I wanted to kind of lay out what lore has been inside the game of Star Citizen and where it might be going with the next year or so. So I'll kind of give a very, very brief overview of where we've been, and then we'll kind of discuss a little bit about if there's anything else you all want to add about where it is, because the main start of the story technically was Xenothreat, the Xenothreat event. That seems to be the main catalyst in the beginning. So the first invasion of Xenothreat to the Stanton system is the first real lore point we have in game. That's technically for CIG's point of view, but there is actually an earlier lore point in game, which is the Jumptown Wars, which was canonized after the fact. But that doesn't seem to have a huge impact. So, go ahead,
We
Al.
also had the raid on Vega 2.
Yes, that is
incorporated us into the story, and also the vote.
Al, you're muted for some reason. Somehow you just went muted.
Yeah, he was talking about the vote for the Imperator, which of course then translated into like posters in game and gave us an influence on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Al still appears to be talking, but we can't hear him.
Al.
I think he can't hear us either.
Okay.
So.
No.
This is actually kind of funny.
I should have just tried to mime so that Al.
Okay, yeah, that's another one. Mats, do you know of any other events that kind of have brought forward in the lore that you can think of?
Well, not in the time frame that it would actually matter for the jump in for the new players when they enter the sentence system for the first time in this year.
Anything that's happened in the past that you can remember that was in game, not like an exterior thing.
I think they didn't they had a point on the Grimhex station for some takeovers from the pirate gangs and the exactly, and the harassment they did with the space stations, the assaults on
Yeah. So we also have the blockade stuff. Yeah, the original Ninetales lockdowns. Yeah.
I mean, they didn't work in game, but technically they were there.
Yeah, technically they existed. And I think the most recent one, the real start of the actual narrative of Star Citizen, for this year and for in general is the Save Stanton event. So like Save Stanton
Mhm.
seems to be the first planned release of them going from no story in game to a story in game, with Overdrive being sort of the prequel to that, since it was sort of bringing back the Nine Tails event, so or the Xenothreat stuff. So we do have some light narrative, but most of it was introduced through exterior means. There's a lot of narrative in Star Citizen, but it's not in the game. I think Al's trying to reset real quickly, see if we can get it functioning. But specifically, the main story of Star Citizen seems to start with Save Stanton, which is why we have 2 chapters with it, which is interesting. That being said, where do you see the main thrust of the story of Star Citizen going forward? Just big wide sweeps from this Save Stanton event, where we had the slicers coming into Stanton and attacking various locations, and now the Frontier Fighters and the Citizens for Prosperity are now in Pyro, causing trouble for the headhunters. Where do we see this going beyond this stage? I'll start with you, Mats.
Yeah, I probably think CG has now a really good chance to like introduce again like the mission givers that they tried earlier in Stanton from the corporations. Just because in the event of like going after the pirates and actually like securing the jump point itself. And I think like the foothold with the
Stanton Station?
Stanton exactly
Yeah.
with the Stanton
Stanton
Gateway
Gateway.
Station.
Stanton Gateway, yeah.
Yeah. That probably will, for the near future, will be like a main focus point, and then we get like some introductions of the smaller gangs that there with the Loken mission givers that they teased, and also like in CitizenCon,
Okay.
where I think they mentioned them. So I think probably in that direction, like not all, but in that direction.
More towards the
I think they
mission
will
giver
go,
styles, like the return to the mission givers. Hey,
Yeah, exactly.
Jail. Where do you think the narrative is going to be pushing towards? Just broad strokes with 2025.
I'm not sure with 2025 as much as I think what we see in 2025 is going to build to what the narrative will be for 1.0, because I think that essentially the tech of the narrative, like running Xenothreat, if you wanted to swap it out for a Xi'an destroyer or something, and you could have a narrative around that. And my answer to that would be answering a fundamental gameplay narrative question for Star System 1.0. Why can we only go to 5 systems?
Mm-hmm.
I think that they're going to attempt to address that in a narrative sense. I think that the narrative justification for why players are isolated to 5 systems will be probably a Vandal invasion. And we'll see more of this sort of large-scale efforts of adversarial stuff over like capital ships, because they'll just eventually swap out like a Xenothreat Idris for a Vandal driller, or,
Yeah.
and things like that. And so I think we'll start seeing more sort of prototype things where you could just swap it to Vandal and it would make sense. That's based on my kind of assumption of something that's going to be like the core spine to the 1.0
story.
main story. Yeah.
Okay. Al, can you hear us?
I can.
We can hear you.
Hey.
Cool. Excellent. We're back.
Oh, perfect.
Go ahead, Mats.
Yes,
You were going to say something, or no?
Mm.
Okay. So,
No,
Al, your thoughts on where the general narrative drive is going to happen in this next year in 2025.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with what Joe was saying. It makes sense to explain why we can't go beyond the 5 systems, and we've got the problems with law and order. But I think the Vandal threat from Odin and also the neighbouring systems being so close to that area does give a reason to lock down the systems and say, okay, it's for security. We are limited to where we can go. So I think that'll be one thing they do to explain that, to help people understand why we can't go to Seoul or why we can't go to Croshaw, because they are big systems in the world. But I think they'll probably also start to develop, hopefully put more of that backstory into the things that are going on in the verse to help bring people who are new to the game up to some of those events. So, like the senatorial elections and things that helped us draw us into the events of the game. You'll remember, back in 2014, the news report that Vega had been attacked by the Vandal. That was huge for us. So it's those types of things that I think, or hope, that they will do to actually draw people into that lore and the story.
So I kind of am going to agree with that. Is I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation, but I also think that narratively speaking, we're going to see a lot of experimental narratives of the writers and the mission designers and those sorts of things really figuring out how they want to tell the story. So technically speaking, it's going to be like using different mission types, but I think we'll also see a variety of different ways of expressing the story. I think we'll probably see at least one full cutscene story narrative, like maybe event or something that's full integrated, like something like you'd see from Squadron, that they want to test to see if it works. I think we'll see maybe a lot of sort of just audio driven, where you have like maybe a little portrait of somebody and then the audio of them playing. And we'll almost certainly, at least early on, see a bunch of stuff that's just, here's the mission, bunch of text in the screen, here you go. I think that is where they are right now, is that sort of like read this mission flavor and just go, with hopefully the whole idea that there is going to be reputation gates. So you go do this mission for this group, you're going to be gated out of specific items or specific things or locations that you can't go to by doing those missions. And then hopefully, this is just my hope, that they'll slowly tier it up so that like we have mission givers, like when Matt said, like a return of the mission givers, where you may have some small narrative, but they talk to you through audio and update you on it here and there. Because the reality is that text-based missions would work well in 1995, but I don't think don't work well in 2025. Most people expect those audio and the video, especially for like immersion's sake. So,
well, if we look back to the two of the best missions we had early on, one was the Tessa Bannister series,
Yes.
which was just audio, but you'd fly to the their station, and she'd give us missions to go off, and eventually you'd come across a Vandal raiding party.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was also the Ruin Kovalek Station mission, which I still think is one of the better missions. And depending on what you did, you could end up with different results. And that was always a great mission. But it showed the Kovalek's one showed the lack of security, but the corruption that was in the system, showing the problems that are there, as a result of it being sold off to 4 different corporations. And the Tessa Bannister one helped us get into the lore of not only the problems that people were facing out in the deep, but also the threat of the Vandal. So, but they were 2 great missions way back. So hopefully we'll see kind of a return to that type of thing as well.
And I really think when I talk about mission givers, I don't think like we will see like interactions with NPCs directly, but more over the Mobi-Glass and like this Tessa Bannister missions and
The chain
the
missions.
Clear Wanted. Exactly. And there was another one like a missing Starfarer.
Yeah, that was one of the early ones.
From
Yeah.
my family. Yeah. And I think we will see a lot more of these, but I think when we see them with the story behind, they will try like to keep focus on local stuff in Pyro, just because they don't then they don't have to retcon later on.
Especially if something
Like
is
big things.
big. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like we talked about they trying to explain why exactly we can't use jump points, and I think the Vandal invasion is a really good reason, but how they will like introduce that we still can like jump to Terra on that point. I think we will see that later when we see Nyx or even Kestra, because then we have those jump points, and at that point it would make sense to then elaborate, hey, that happened, because I don't think with only 2 systems now and like the foreseeable future, like I don't think we get the next star system like till the I don't give dates. Like
Okay.
Yeah, not for a while.
probably not this year. So I think they will keep also the lore missions or the lore stuff we actually get in game localized for Pyro, so they
I,
don't have to explain themselves
I
later.
mean, I don't think that they'll launch a narrative reason why we can't use jump points until 1.0, because it's that transition from this is a product in development to this is supposedly a complete product. And I do have 3 theories. Like, there's 3 theories that I could apply for why we're isolated to 5 systems if they want to give a narrative explanation. And I think they do want to give a narrative explanation because they want to give a narrative explanation to why do you
Everything.
respawn?
Yeah.
Everything, right. And the reason why I think the Vandal one is the most straightforward, the most obvious, is because you can do Battlestar Galactica vibes. It links to Squadron 42. You can foreshadow how it suddenly happens with what happens in Squadron 42. I do expect it to, if they go down that, it will be like, flash news, huge Vandal invasion that nobody expected.
Yeah. I can also see
one is.
I could also see security reasons. Like you're locking it down because you don't have the proper authorization to go between these 2 systems, and like all the systems we're going to be in except for Terra are going to be absolutely massively criminal in some way, shape, or form. Well, Stanton is filled with criminals. I fully expect Castra to be filled with smugglers because of its location near Xi'an space. It's also right on the border with Xi'an space, so it may also be one of those like, or I guess not anymore.
Hey,
oh yeah,
yeah. Hey, it could also be that if you go like the jump points are there and you can go through them, and if you go through them, you just get murked by Vandal, and they've got like a really good quantum style, whatever.
Yeah.
The other one is okay. The other 2 are, Terra Sol Civil War, which everyone's always anticipated, which will be interesting, but a big jump. And I think that we'd have to see a lot of narrative development to lead to that point. And then the third one, which I think is the least interesting, but is still foreshadowed, is failure of the jump point network, like Oratani style. I just don't think that there's not much narrative interesting things happening there, though. It's more sort of like, oh no, the world outside is fine. You're just in a bubble, and like as somebody's saying in the chat, jump points closed for resurfacing.
Yeah.
I mean, So I think but I don't expect that to happen until 1.0 launches.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. And I do think that 2025, Mats is right on this one, is that we're going to see a much heavier emphasis on Pyro. The relationship between Pyro and Stanton is going to be the main focus of 2025 and probably even 2026. Because while Nyx, I'm a little more optimistic. I think we will get Nyx this year, but I don't think we'll get Nyx to the degree where we're going to be able to see a significant narrative push in the direction of Nyx, because they really want to flesh out and make a reason for you to go to Pyro, a reason for you to join with the Fire Rats or the Headhunters or the Horizon or whatever. They want you to do that, but they also don't want you to just be able to just do whatever you want. They want to kind of narrow the sandbox a little bit to tell these stories. So
Yeah, now, Paulie, there's no way the Hurstons are supplying the Citizens for Prosperity and Pyro. We want to keep our business above board.
Uh-huh.
Those rumors of Hurston ships are arriving at Eagles are just rumors. Just no proof to that.
There's
No
no
proof at all.
It just so happens that the leader of the Citizens for Prosperity is a former accountant for Hurston Dynamics. It just happens to be.
No, they're off the books. They're no longer employed by Hurston Dynamics. They will let it go for reasons I cannot go into.
Well, yeah, I also go ahead.
Pyro does become developing Pyro narratively does become the most important thing, because as soon as you have Castra and Nyx and Terra, anything that starts in Stanton and Terra and ends up in Nyx and Castra, or vice versa, involves Pyro through a transit, because that's how they've laid out the map. Unless they're changing the jump points and where they go, everything will always involve a transit through Pyro. And if that's a huge frustration, people won't want to do those missions. And if it's just a Euro truck simulator, put on your autopilot and point your ship right, it's not adding anything. So ensnaring, having interesting things to get ensnared in Pyro, even if you're just trying to pass through, is a gift that will keep on giving when it comes to narrative development.
To pick up a point you made a bit earlier, Giles, about the Terra Sol Civil War. It was something I was actually thinking of as being another option they had for why we only have the 5 systems. And it could be that Terra has finally said, no, we're seceding. You're not doing the job of protecting the region properly. And the 5 systems are the 5 systems of the Terra breakaway. So, but that, again, it's one of those things that CIG would have to develop in terms of a story. There is quite a bit of a backstory in terms of that Terra movement for independence, and it even predates the Meza period. The Mezas, and they see themselves. And I don't like
terrorists.
Terra. I think they are all terrorists.
Yeah,
they are all terrorists. But there is an element where and one of the reasons I don't like them is when you read the lore, it's kind of everyone is equal, but we're more equal than everyone else.
Yeah.
So they're very Orwellian. They're very. I think the Hurstons would probably get on well with them.
I was going to say, would you say they're very Byzantine?
They're very Byzantine. Strange that. So as much as I don't like the way that Terrans come across. They are snotty. They are snobby, as Delano says. They are. If you look at the story that Star Citizen has in terms of its kind of concept and kind of overarching theme, which is the fall and decline of the Roman Empire as kind of its backdrop. So we're looking at the fall and decline of the UEE. Terra is Byzantium, and Earth is Rome, and you've got that player and that friction between them. And so, as much as I may hate Terra because of what it is, the reason the Romans established Byzantium was that it had the ability to be right on the border where all the problems were. You could very easily get your armies to all the trouble spots, and that's what Terra gives, to be able to get the fleets to those trouble spots really quickly. Whereas, so yeah.
That's you say something?
Yeah, I want to actually hook into that theme, because we heard in the past a lot more about the Terra and Earth dispute, let's say, but we never heard the military side of it. What's actually happening. We have the Castra system now in the 1.0 future, where they say, yeah, that's still an active military base. And then that's the question about will Terra also split or try to split from the UEE with let's say with an amount of the UEE Navy forces.
Yeah.
And is that maybe part of a strategy to keep out the Vandal on the rest of the UEE space in a whole. Like if they create like this safe zone we are stuck in, that they can like, or that they think they can contain the Vandal evasions into UE space better when like Terra tries to split itself up, and then they can like shove all the problems onto them. But I also think like that would be pretty limiting for the future for in-game reasons, because when the Earth and Terra split and the Vandal occasions are like really that big of a focus, like they showed us, I can think, or I assume that they will also like lock us for the first login to Terra to get us on board with the situation, and then just said like, okay, now you can explore the story or the other systems, and then let us go. So
in a way, that the point I made about like the developments we see now will be the gameplay prototypes for these big events, right? One of the points in favor of the idea of the Solterra and Civil War being like the main story is any event where you can pick a side, because I don't imagine that they're going to have anything where we could pick a side with the Vandal. Like,
Yeah.
that would just be a bit
No.
narratively weird.
No.
So I kind of, as we see things develop, I think if you see a event where they've thought up some essentially, a generic faction of baddies, and they're ontologically evil, go and kill them. You can't take their side. I'm mentally thinking they're preparing for events where they'll swap that out for Vandal.
Mhm.
Whereas if you see something where it's pick a side and choose which side you want to back. I mean, that could stay as just gang warfare, but it could also be something that they then swap out for this sort of factionalism gameplay later.
Yeah.
Uh,
I agree. I think like Xenothreat, for instance, is going to go away before 1.0 hits, just because the CIG wants to make them the ontologically evil faction of Pyro. They're the ones that nobody likes, nobody in Pyro likes, nobody in the UEE likes. So they're just sort of like the punching bags of the story so far. So I can definitely see them going away, because unless CIG wants to actually incorporate the reputation system within Xenothreat and have players play with them, but they don't seem to want to do that. So I can definitely see that. So,
No, Luna Maria.
but also
no,
like-
Al is not broken.
Yeah, but also like what I would question is if we could already choose like a side in 1.0,
mhm.
because of the limited space we have. Like, I don't know if any of the systems would like qualify as a UE stronghold, so you can like, if you pick the UE side for Earth,
Yes. There
for,
were,
for the centralists.
'cause I mean,
that-
you're right. Because I think the one thing to point out, or just to kind of jump onto that real quick, is that like Stanton is the median point. It's seen as like the median point between the eastern and the west. So like Stanton is probably the furthest west eastern province, I guess you could say, of the empire. So, but yeah, it's very much more Terra focused than Earth focused. So
yeah. So I think they will like the gameplay we will see. They will try to get those like how to choose a faction, and that. But I think that will actually like come later, like in 1.x patches, when we have like actually Terran own space, like Terran loyalist space. And I think they will like try to divert like our attention first with Pyro and the gangs, and test the faction stuff itself for political factions. Later we will get with the whole other more lawful systems. We will get more like brands, more corporations where we get to side with. and then they will like use the Vandal just as a punching bag. Like I think they will introduce Nyx as like these, hey, you can go there and do PvE without thinking about who you will piss off or not. Like just to give people like this space of where they can go savage and uh, do their fleet battles, and like there are only like 2 planets and the asteroid belt, and they have a lot of space and they can go crazy in the systems, so they get the time to develop the rest of it.
Okay.
I could see the Vandal not just being used as a punching bag, but the tool that's used to take the heat off. So you've got say the Terran Soul War heating up. It's getting rather savage, and you want to reset it. You bring the Vandal in. The common enemy of all humanity. So everyone turns to attack and deal with that
Vandal.
threat,
Oh.
and then it calms down again. So
let's kind of move this over towards that question as well, because I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about 2025 and the movement towards 1.0. I'll start with you on this one, Al. Do you think the story that they're going to start to introduce in 2025, things like Save Stanton and moving forward, other missions that they are planning on doing, do you think this will feed into the actual main story of 1.0? Is this all heading towards that main story? Or are we just still going to see a lot more? Is this just sort of like the experimental phase still, where they're sort of figuring out how they want to make these missions, how they want to introduce story and plots into the game?
I think it'll be a mix. Like if you look at the way we've got the factions in Pyro at the moment, they are choose a side. You pick the Citizens for Prosperity or the Citizens for Progress. Like I think it's Citizens for Progress is actually the name, but I keep calling it Citizens for Prosperity because it's
No, they're Citizens for Prosperity.
Influence.
They used to be
All right.
Citizens for Pyro, and now they're Citizens for Prosperity. So.
Yeah. So a very very Hurstonian name, I think.
Yeah.
So, but if you pick that faction, you kind of lock yourself out of the other factions, and so that's kind of going forward. I can see that being the things that will influence gameplay and influence the choices we make. So choices are going to matter, and it's going to pick up that idea that CIG has always said choices matter. But that's also going to help them feed out the story of what's going on in Pyro and help us understand the whole situation. I think the fact that the Citizens for Prosperity have that very Hurston link ties in that story with helping us understand the relationship and why Hurston or why Stanton want to influence Pyro and why they want to take the heat off. Stop the brigands coming in from over the wall and basically hold them at that point. So those types of things will help us just stay in the game. But it's also I think they also want to move to that point where they're bringing the newer players, those people who haven't been here since 2013 or 2014 or 2012, and following the law and weren't involved in a news flash for the siege of Vega or voted for our Tavaran senator. Those people need to be brought up to speed in terms of law to enrich them, and I think hopefully that's kind of the avenue they'll kind of start to develop. So I think we'll see Pyro being the experimental bed, but also as they develop that battle beat, slowly get expanded as we move out. I hope.
All right. I'm trying to still process that. I think I get what you're saying. I think I know what you're saying. But Jail, your thoughts? Do you think that what we're going to see now is still more experimental storytelling in terms of CIG figuring out how they want to tell the story that they're telling through the missions, or do you think that they're starting to build the narrative that they want to release with 1.0?
I think they still need to do development on the underlying gameplay that they attach story hooks to. You can make a fetch quest and go, okay, what's the story behind why we need that object and who's got it? You can do a kill quest. Who are those people? Why do they deserve to die? Why was my motivation for wanting them dead? But we need to get, I think there's still levels of complexity that are needed for the gameplay, which is then a sort of sort of a cyclical thing of what gameplay loops are needed to for narrative hooks, and what narrative hooks can be then serviced by those gameplay options. We've seen a lot on Star Citizen 1.0 having non-combat factions being part of the main story. They said that the main story will introduce you to all these factions. You'll do some missions for all of them, and you'll be able to invest your time to go deeper into them. So I think we'll start to see more narrative gameplay, new gameplay and new narrative around hooks that will be developing towards those aims as well. Not just, collecting the boxes for your existing events, but yes, stuff that it adds more complexity onto that, I'd say. So I would expect to see that being the focus, even if it's not maybe completed this year, but I think we'll see more discussion about it.
Okay. Same question.
Yeah, basically, I would agree with what Jail said. I think we will see like narrative stories in the sense of that the quests we do will have follow-up missions, but they will like tell local stories, contained stories that have like a start and a finish, and you can play through them in an evening, and like more things that will tell you about what's the current situation like. What's the feeling like Pyros should give you when you go there, when you like speak with the citizens of Prosperity, in what situations are they currently in, but nothing grand structure basic like a red line where you can follow and say, oh yeah, back in the days when CIG was still like in the with Star Citizen in the 2.x phase, you can now connect like things they planned back then with things they plan for the next year or so. I think that will come later. And yeah, and I think we will get a few more retcons. I know people don't like them, but I think as the tech and the gameplay will develop, a lot of stuff they're even like planning now will like get rewritten to like be adjustable for the 1.0 kind of gameplay we will have then in the future. So
yeah, I can see that. Definitely, retcons are a matter of fact. If any story that's in development is going to have retcons. I don't think we're going to see major retcons. Like the UE isn't suddenly going to be renamed like the Galactic Federation or something like that. It's but I do think we're going to see some of the details of planets and maybe some of the other, like maybe some factions getting worked around a little bit more, so that they can either be fluffed up or be split up into different things.
Well,
yeah,
that's one of the things
also,
Dave
like-
Haddock.
sorry.
Go ahead.
That's one of the things Dave Haddock said in the past, isn't it? Like the lore team, they'll write the lore, but they try not to go into the minutiae because they want to give the broad outline. They don't want to paint the whole canvas because there's got to be stuff for us to discover. There's got to be stuff for the developers to be able to be free to create. Because if you paint every detail and then you say to the developer, you've got to build this ship or you've got to build this aspect, and there's no, and you've got every aspect of it kind of detailed out already, you limit their creativity, and so you want to open that up so they can create, but you also want the framework that they can work within. So
also they learned quite a long time ago that the only thing worse than a gap in knowledge is something that is going to be overwritten. And something that was written on a page 10 years ago will not be a barrier to someone having a better idea when they actually get to developing it. Like Pyro, according to the star map, was like 10 times the size of Stanton. Everyone kept saying, oh, think how the ships are going to get around when it's 10 times as big. And it's like, it's not going to be 10 times as big.
Yeah.
And it isn't.
Yeah,
because
it's
they just changed that number.
slowly maneuvered it down to so it's like only two or three times the
Yeah.
size of Stanton. Still big, but
But on the other hand, when we introduced Castra and they started talking about the architectural style that they were developing for Castra, and they were referencing a document that was written in 2014 about architectural styles of the Empire. Like that was part of the level designers things. It was like, oh yeah, this is Henoism or whatever it is, the
it's Henoism.
ultra brutal, yeah, Henoism, and it's like that was from 10 for the Chairman in 2014.
Yeah.
So they are going back to that pool of work to fish it for good things.
Mm.
They are sometimes like I still think one of the biggest sorts of bad change law wise was insisting on regeneration, respawning being worked in because frankly, death has ended. Why is anyone talking about anything other than the end of death
Yeah.
and the conquering of death?
But
why
it,
why is Xenothreat thinking about anything other than like, hang on, we're now an immortal species. We need to realign all our values around this fundamental
No.
change.
but Joe, that's not what the regeneration does. Regeneration just explains Death of the Spaceman. We still are going to have a limited number of respawns, even the way we've talked about it.
Narrative
Is that
wise,
Yeah.
but narrative wise, regeneration didn't exist. It didn't
no?
exist in the world,
It
and then it was invented, and we're living through the
That's
rollout
right.
of that technology.
because in the narrative sense of what they wanted was the number of near-death experiences. But how do you have a near-death experience in space and then still be able to come back? So
Yeah,
the
yeah.
regeneration is a way to explain that going on.
But
And
he's-
CIG have even
what
said,
Jail's saying is like, how does that affected a society? When you go from like,
Yeah.
if we today had regeneration in our life right now, it would fundamentally alter religion, let alone like how we
Yeah.
view the world and how we view ourselves, because suddenly that doesn't matter anymore. It does matter in the long sense that eventually we'll have the big death, but like when death is no longer a threat, how does that change?
okay, so
People's
when
behavior.
you're a cat with 9 lives,
That's
Yeah.
why it's so toxic to the idea of it as a narrative, because they didn't need to explain it. They didn't need but
Yeah.
deciding that they needed to explain it meant that they introduced such an atomic bomb under everything that everyone's values, everyone's factions, every political thing would be changing to talk about this in the same way that the outbreak of World War One changed Europe. It's kind of
Yeah.
the only thing.
Yeah.
So
But I mean, like our relationship with death. I know chat's saying it's like it's not immortality. It's not immortality, but our relationship with death would change. And if you look at history and how history like talks us about deal with things, like look at the Black Death. Death became so common during the plague eras that people became entirely desensitized to it. It's why we have so many like depictions of skeletons and skeletal figures in medieval art, because it was just like death was common. Death was everywhere. And it was in everybody's face. Rather than being something that would happen naturally at the end of life or through an accident, it was just like random and pointless. People just died. And that changed how Europe viewed life and death. It changed how people in Europe saw life in many, many ways. And World War One is another example where a relationship with death became different, because like an entire artistic movement came around about how like what is the point of life. And so like what Jail's trying to say is that narratively speaking, this has completely changed humanity. We wouldn't be necessarily always be like, okay, well, we got to take care of Ninetales or got to take care of Xenothreat. It would be like, why? Why do we care? Like, or why would Xenothreat care as much when they could just do these things? And there would be also political aspects for it to it. So I get the point. I think it's still a clever story for what they're doing for, as long as they really lean into that. But I get what the complaint, what Jail's saying.
I don't think they're leaning into it.
No.
Well, I have leaned into it a little bit in terms of we have seen there's been discussion, at least lore-wise, story of what does it mean for life. The purists who I haven't been regenerated yet. So there are factions who say, no, I'm not getting regenerated because it's not me. It's a fake. That type of thing. We've also had the news that there are problems with the regen tech. We haven't heard what those problems are yet, but that has been teased in some of the lore releases we've seen that there's some form of problems with that regen text. So what it is, we don't know yet, but there is something not quite right. So I think they are leaning into that or trying to use that. But I think the idea of it was to explain what that outline Death of the Spaceman was going to be, and so it's not necessarily
Well,
immortality, but it is.
there was an explanation for what Death of the Spaceman was, which was just you got rescued. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not a good one. Yeah. Yes, they did put some lore articles out at the time, but they kind of haven't since to a great
Yeah.
degree. It was all around the same release, and it was just this example of they had a gameplay decision, about how it worked and so forth, that was sort of they didn't seem to have weighed it up in any way. It was entirely gameplay over
Story.
narrative, but then insisting that the narrative needed to change to accommodate the gameplay. As I say, I don't think that the gameplay should have changed. I just don't think it needed explaining. I don't think it needs explaining any more than logging off or loss of connection. I don't need loss of connection, a 30k error, to have an in-game explanation where it's like, oh, it's brain problems relating to Moby class overuse.
Yeah.
It.
I get it. I understand it.
Yeah, but
Go ahead, Bats.
To get also where we came from this discussion, like I call it the Port Olisa treatment.
Okay.
Like there are stuff in the lore that get changed for gameplay and then get forgotten. Like it just we have like we said with the regenerative technology. Like first off, it doesn't work always. Second, we don't know how it works. Like in game, the technicians don't know why it works, and yeah, and all the political and religious and all the lore content stuff that would imply such a change in the culture, like it got the same treatment as Port Olisar. It existed, it changed.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
If something happened to it, we don't know. It exists somewhere in the timeline, and then it gets dropped, and no one's talking about it. So they hope no one asks these questions, but they keep it open. So if they maybe come back later to it, they have something to pick up on. And I think we will. That's something what I think we will see more often in the near future with the new star systems and the new gameplay opportunities. We will see more localized gameplay, narrative stuff, but also stuff that like a lot of people will exist, cool stories, and they just vanish in the grand scheme of what happens in Star Citizen. Like and even early, like the Tressa gameplay stuff or the Benny Henge. Like you can still find it and or find someone that knows about it, but stuff they will like create, think, oh yeah, that's great, and then drop and forget about it. Maybe pick it up later, but not certainly.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Where's Tessa type question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But only like a quarter of the community even remembers Tessa because the community has grown so much since those 2.0 days. So I personally think what we're going to be seeing this year is going to be less of an exploration of 1.0 storyline and more of the thing that they were hinted at CitizenCon, which was that the local stories. Because they want to do like the 1.0 main story, and then they also wanted to have each system to have its own system stories, and then inside of those systems, each organization stories, stuff like that. I think that's what we're going to see with Pyro is an experimentation into how to tell a story about a system. My hope is that it includes things like faction warfare and faction transfer of locations. So, like, if players work really hard, then they might lead to an event where a outpost is being invaded by one of the factions, and then you can either defend it or attack it, and then whoever wins that battle, that faction takes it over, and so it's sort of like the power play aspect of Elite, how that they did it in Elite, something like that, or Star Citizen sort of spin on that. That's my hope of where they're going with it, but not necessarily true. So
a bit like a dynamic universe or dynamic system where bases or systems are changing. Very much Dark Age of Camelot in terms of a realm versus realm region. Very much like Starfleet battles and their dynamic universe.
There was a New World has a similar thing with the forts. So yeah,
Guild Wars 2 with its forts.
Yeah,
in the realm versus realm system. So I could see that being where they go, because it's common. It's been a common thing in quite a few games, whether it's been the tabletop-y type games, whether it's been like Starfleet battles, or whether it's other games like Dark Age of Camelot, Elite, Guild Wars 2. So, and we know from early on, Chris was leveraging into those types of games, Guild Wars 2, Dark Age of Camelot,
Yeah.
So,
here's a question though. Right, here's a nasty question. Will the story, let's say the story of Pyro involves unseating Xenothreat from Ruin Station and someone else taking over. Is that a story that we collectively play out once and it can be replayed out and everybody experiences the idea that now, it's not Xenothreat anymore, it's this other faction, they take it over, so everyone goes to Ruin Station and they find a different faction in control? Or is this going to be a little bit more instanced? And when a player experiences Pyro for the first time, they're experiencing a Pyro that is under the thumb of Xenothreat, and they encounter Xenothreat, and then you play through the story with you and your friends, and it ends with a raid on Ruin, and then you essentially are unlocking the liberated Ruin Station that other players have already been visiting. Is that, which design are they going to go for? I think both could be fun, but they reflect very different ethoses.
Yes.
I got the impression from early on that Chris was going down the line, or liked the way that Guild Wars 2 went with their bosses and the instanced events, where the boss turns up and everyone who's in the server can converge on that boss and help defeat it. Rather than that instance, everyone does that job. And then, I do a job, and then 2 weeks later you do the same job, and I walk past and I see you doing that, talking to the guy, and I hear the chat from my thing, and I go, yeah, it's a repeat. I don't think they want to go down that line, but I can see that opens it up for everyone. But I could see them also just doing these missions where it kind of, there's an event, everyone's going to be involved, someone's in control for a while, but we've also got, we're only 10% of the population, and so they use that 90% of NPCs to reset to where they want it to be. So yes, we boot Xenothreat out, and Xenothreat come back and push everyone out again. And
yeah, I mean, you also have the problem of people being that feeling cheap. That will feel cheap, because like you the players did all this work and they did this event and they kicked out Xenothreat, and now somehow Palpatine returned. That story, like that's just sort of like oh, so the bad guy's back somehow, and we have no narrative reason for it, or it's a loose narrative reason. Yeah. So I can see that also being a problem. I see what Jail's getting at, and I do wonder if that's the case, of where people are going to be at different stages of the story, and different stages of the story will lock you out of certain events until you complete other stages, and then you can play with your friends. I think CIG is not going to do that, only because that removes a lot of players playing together. And so much of what CIG's design language for the game has been is 3 to 4 players playing together, but also like with the PvP stuff, like the larger aspects of like base building and larger organizations, that sort of end game content they want to get to. I don't think CIG wants to lock out the end game for somebody who hasn't played the main story, because they don't want people to just be forced to play the main story or a local story to be able to experience the full content that's in that area. Though I do think that they still will use instancing, because they've already said they want to do instancing with the Vanduul raids, I could easily see them do instancing as a for things like the takeover of Ruin Station. But
Right.
there's a lot of work they're putting into, like, say, like Xenothreat, for them to just be gone one day, and it's like, okay, cool, all this asset, all this work is now gone. We're done. We're not going to see them anymore as a threat. So there's definitely going to be a balance of economical use of what they already of assets they've already created, and also telling an interesting story that's a fine line they're going to have to balance. Go ahead, Matt.
Um, yeah, what I think they should try, or better, what I think they will try is like a Helldiver 2 kind of approach. Like the we will get missions to help factions. Then they will pop instances where we get the big fights against stations, fleets, and stuff. And in the background, there will like a percentage meter that goes up. And if in a certain point of time, if a certain threshold of that percentage is like triggered, then it will change globally for everyone. Like a specific faction will then get a lead, a heads up, and then like the missions for them or against them will like multiply in some sort of manner, so they can like simulate, yeah, everyone's doing the missions that they want, and they get a pull out of it where like the player's interest lies the most, like which missions for which factions are done the most, and then they can like gradually change the state of the player environment and the universe for everyone, so no one gets like this feeling, oh, I grinded for this faction like for a month with my friends, and we like managed to get a hold of the whole planet or whatever, and then certainly it changes. But like they will gradually, like in Helldiver, you go
Line go up.
like
Yeah.
metaphorically.
Yeah.
There's a planet. There's a percentage time. If you win, the percentage goes up. If you lose, the percentage goes down. A little bit more complicated with all affection, but I think in the background they will resort to something like that.
I could see something like that. Instance content
Yeah.
specifically for faction conflict. I could see that. Yeah. Jill?
I think to sort of bring it back round to answer my own question from
Okay,
the
go
top
for
again,
it.
I suppose is as I've said, I think that the content that they develop now is showing prototypes that they're going to carry forward, and all of these big events have always been server wide. There's never been this sort of instant stuff. They have talked about instance battle zones under Arc Corp for things and so forth. But I mean, if the main story is something that the problem I have, I suppose, is that if you're going through the main story, you're going to have people at different stages of the main story, and if it doesn't have impacts on the world around you, then you're not going to feel meaningful.
Yeah.
So it's that tension. So I wonder if they will, to some extent, use a trick of players at different stages of the main story experience the world slightly differently, like and to some extent that being instancing. I do think that for Xenothreat, it will be a server-wide, universe-wide thing, that one day we kill Xenothreat and it's replaced with another gang, and then it maybe devolves into, or not devolves, but it evolves into a king of the hill between the remaining gangs. I feel like probably, as you say, it would be bad if Palpatine somehow has returned and Xenothreat come back, but I can see it turning into a rotating carousel of the Fire Rats and
For sure.
all these other groups,
Yeah,
using the same mechanics.
If we boot Xenothreat out, does it mean they're wiped out, or does it just mean they're retreated?
They're retreated. Yeah.
So one of the questions we've raised in the past is, are Xenothreat really the Mezzas? Is it Fiona Mezza coming back? Is it she behind the scenes?
And how much do these factions play into 1.0 is another question too, because like Xenothreat could be a very important faction for the 1.0 story. Same with like I have a feeling that they might be them and Citizen or Citizens for Prosperity, but the People's Alliance. I could see these factions becoming major plot points in the the 1.0 story, so they can't go away if a player comes in 2 years after 1.0 story is released and needs to play that story. Then those factions have to be there and be in those locations in order for them to continue to tell that story. So
I could see a reason. Go on.
The big question with the coherency of the storyline is also like a technical question for some part, because we hear CIG again and again talking about how they were like want to that we get more controls over the shards we play in, and how they want to develop that. And I'm still one of the believers that they will get to the point where they get one mega shard for everyone. I hope. I'm still one of those people. But even if like they are localized, then will they like hold on to the thought that they will like synchronize the main story for everyone, or will like every time zone create an own narrative over time, like how it will develop? Like that's also like the technical question behind how they will do and prepare missions for not only the whole game, but also in that local system part, which faction wins and gets a hand over the other and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's a good question too. That one. I will add one more thing, Al, because I just realized something. I think I know how CIG is going to do the instance main mission stuff, because as you were explaining, like, you know, how do you deal with people? You don't want people to be doing the same thing. I think what CIG is going to do is they're going to create main instanced missions for players just starting the campaign, just starting the main story. And then a lot of the storyline missions are going to be randomized missions, just sort of regular missions that they kind of tie some narrative in, like, hey, my contact needs some help over here, go do this sort of thing. But they're going to be major beats which will be instanced, where unless you have that mission, you cannot do it. Other players may be able to join you and replay those missions, but those stories are unique to the players who have that instance. No one else can walk into them. They're locked down for that whole point of view, and then move forward. But that would also mean that everyone is the main hero, which I don't like. I hate that narrative with MMOs where everyone is the savior for some reason, you know. But you still want to tell a story, so that's the difficult part that I can see coming in there. Sorry, go ahead, Al.
Just got to remember the train of thought I had. It's okay. But I could see that being a way you deal with it, so everyone is the hero, and yet it's one of the things I always hate. You know, I defeated the
Lich King,
Darth Maul, and I defeated the Witch King, I defeated Darth Maul, I defeated. Oh, so did I.
Yeah, so did everybody. Yeah.
You know, it kind of lessens that. Whereas that was one of the things I really did like about Guild Wars, Guild Wars 2, the main boss had spawned, everyone could go there. The problem with that is I'd spawn the main boss, everyone would go there. A day later, you'd spawn the main boss, everyone.
Yeah.
And so it was still that same type of problem. One of the things I was thinking of it in terms of Xenothreat is one of the reasons, as much as everyone hates Xenothreat, one of the reasons why Xenothreat is still there and still valuable is they've got the big fleet that actually helps keep the Vandal at bay. So they may be our enemy, we may hate them, but I don't want them to go away because the UEE's not here. They're the guys who are keeping the evil Vandal away. So there are other ways you can look at it, but yeah, I was just thought that could be an interesting way as to why we don't want the Vandal to get, not the Vandal, the new Meza regime to be completely destroyed. So
yeah, and
I think Xenothreat are going to be destroyed. I think they're going to be destroyed before 1.0. I think they're going to be killed as part of the alpha beta experience in Pyro. And my reason for that would be that they are actually really underdeveloped. That, you know, even if you look at the other sides of the same story, the CDF, We got loads of lore about the CDF, how they, relate to the Bremen Defense Force and Rainer Dooley and stuff. We don't know who founded Xenothreat. We don't know where they get their ships from.
Yeah.
They, I mean, for heck's sake, I mean, like the moon Magda of Hurston. I can tell you that Magda went to Geneva Business School.
Yeah.
That's their style of lore when they care
Yeah.
about something that's going to be, and the fact that
Long term.
Xenothreat,
Yeah.
the fact that Xenothreat have no long-term development makes me think that they're going to allow us to permanently kill them, and then there will be something else that fills the gap. And I don't think it's just going to be, Xenothreat becoming Winothreat and becoming Xenothreat becoming a it's not going to be Carbon Copy. I think they're a really boring faction, to be honest. I think that the work they've done on the Pyro gangs gives them so many more colors to paint with than Xenothreat, which was
it's a result of 2015. Like Xenothreat was a 2015 creation, and as I've said many times, 2015 Star Citizen, especially with the writing, was very paint by numbers, big, bold. These are the big ideas. And so Xenothreat was obviously something, I don't know who came up with it. It may have been just like, I know a lot of the lore is just Ben spitting stuff out. So they just went with it. So it may have been something like Ben thought it was a funny pun to say they hate aliens and they're called Xenothreat. Like, so, but yeah, they are very much a underdeveloped. Like, because I can tell you the entire lore of Xenothreat right now. Their leader is called the Commander. And they're made up of a lot of ex-UE military, and they showed up in 2946. Like, Ninetales has more lore than Xenothreat, and they don't have a lot of lore.
When you look at the lore for Xenothreat, I think the stuff that their Mezzas, their Fiona Mezzas coming back.
Yeah,
most of that stuff has been. You, Jail, and I speculating
us talking about
as to who Xenothreat are.
Yeah.
So we've probably done more development of Xenothreat's backstory than CIG have, and that's that kind of does feed to Jail's thing that they're not there for longevity; they're there to fill a gap.
I will also the one counterpoint I'll have is there's a saying that I've heard spoken of by video game content or for video game writers, which is you want to leave a mystery. You don't want to answer every question, because leaving a mystery means people will talk about it. When you answer every question, then they no longer talk about it. It's done. They've completed it.
Mm-hmm. I've heard Dave say the same thing.
Yeah.
Dave Haddock has said exactly the same thing. You want to leave the breadcrumbs.
We've also seen Dave write better mysteries.
Yes.
Yes. The mystery. There are plenty of mysteries in Star Citizen, and they're kind of better written than
Xenothreat.
It really is kind of like those 3 points that they're at Ruin Station. He's called the commander. They've turned up in here. There.
Yeah.
Even the idea that they're UE military, is that even stated, or is that just us interpreting it from the fact that they wear UE military gear?
It's a data leak. That's all I'll say. It's at least at one point they had Dooley say more lines than she did in the original Xenothreat, and one of those lines was her mentioning that they're made up of mostly UE military and complaining about it because she herself was also UE military, and she's like, yeah, shit's bad, but it wasn't that bad. Like, what are you do? Just go to Little Pyro and scrape moss off of walls so you can survive. That's you got to be in some bad stuff for that sort of that. So, like that's. And that may also change because it was a line that was in a unused line for that never came out public. So
I mean, did they cut that because they were letting on too much about a mystery they want to develop, or did they cut that because it's like it's not worth pissing off the people who will feel therefore more more common cause with them, or muddying the waters more? We just want these people to be shot, because it's fun to shoot them.
They're bad guys.
You got that. You got that sense with the Xenothreat in the audio as well, where the guy, you'd blow up a ship and the guy would say, we'll be back because you just killed guys I served with. I knew those guys. So you do have that sense that even without them saying these guys are military, you get the sense that they are military.
No. All right. I think we'll wrap this up with one big question, which is, for people who love stories and loves video game stories, do you believe that 2025 has a lot of potential for CIG to come out and actually like cater to those interests? So people who want to play stories, play video games with deep lore and narrative and characters. Do you think 2025 is that sort of year where this is sort of going to become a thing that CIG does, or is this more still of a experimental year where there's trying to figure things out, trying to see what works and what doesn't? So, like, should people be looking forward to a year where their niche or their what they like in video games is being catered to, or is this more of this is CIG's focus because it's where they want to go long term rather than short term? Al, I'll start with you with that one.
I would like to think it's them going long term, but I'm not sure they're in a position to do that in terms of they can tell the story for Pyro to a certain degree, but then once they tell the story and set that in stone, then that kind of may limit where they go in their other stories, the other systems. And so I can see problems, but I also know that they want to have more narrative and have more of those links and loops and hooks that draw us in and keep us engaged with what's going on and use that to help tell the story of what's going on. So I am tentatively living in hope.
Okay. Jail?
In my experience, gamers feel like their lore interests are being catered for when they play something and they get the sense that they're getting a little bit more out of it because of something that they read or they remembered from a past scene, a past product, a lore article, a book that they didn't have to read, something like that. That they got some insight that other people aren't getting. And some properties are completely dependent on that. If you're watching The Rings of Power and you don't know who Elendil and Galadriel are in the other things, you're just seeing what's on the screen, you are watching a different show to somebody who can tell you the entire lineage of all the elves and whatever. I think that CIG is probably still in the experimental phase. I think that we're not going to be at that point where people are going to feel like they're getting a lot more out of it from having read lore, because we haven't, like, okay, so maybe we'll see Galactopedia going actually in the app properly and people using it and finding more, but really there's not a lot of representation of that content in things in the game yet. Maybe they'll start developing that, but I think that their focus will be more on supporting new gameplay loops that are fundamental for building towards the long-term games of 1.0.
Okay. Mats, same question for you.
I would say yes and no. For like the reason, I think for the people that like get into Star Citizen casually and just play it for fun, they will get more the opportunity to learn about the gangs in Pyro or Stanton, because they're trying to give us missions where they get a bit involved with the lore. And so for people that also like are very interested in the lore, that will be a nice hunt for all the clues. But if you are someone that likes that you like Star Citizen and you know a bit of the lore, but want to have a narrative experience where it's like a story they tell, like a real story, I think it's not the year yet. I think it will come a little bit later.
To wrap this up, I think I'm gonna echo what you said, Matt. I think what all of us said. I would love to see it. I don't think we're gonna see it, but I do think that if you've been waiting for something like more lore to matter, to actually like sit there and go, oh, I care about this gang now. I think this is the year where that starts to happen, where people start to realize there is a universe beyond like getting in your ship and flying around. But I don't think this is the year we're going to get well crafted characters that you can attach yourself to, or narratives that you can follow, and that people can that people can break down in videos for people who don't want to play the whole thing or anything like that. I don't think that's the case. I do think it is more going to be world building with the lore, and I think they have a lot of work to do because they really haven't done that beyond the website. So, and I think that's really going to be the focus this year is to, alongside the fundamental world building of building out reputation systems and mission systems and everything they need to do to flesh out what they have currently, you're also going to see the narrative team and the mission design teams starting to put all this stuff together to create the foundation for those stories to be told. But we're not going to see those stories told for a little while, but maybe not even until 1.0. But
and those stories that we're telling in Pyro, I'd like to see them also do the same thing in Hurston, where you get or not Hurston, in Stanton, where you get the different companies being fleshed out more. Yeah. I want to know more about why we're finding those old medals, in the Tavaran war medals and other bits and pieces in Stanton. I want to hear the story of those. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, we can dig down and find them, but I want to hear that story in game.
Yeah,
they're the types of things I'd like to see.
Yeah, it's like a. We didn't even mention this, and we'll probably bring it up in the question and answers. But like, there's been an entire mission type that they've been developing for like 3 to 4 years now, which they've updated every so often, which is the investigation missions. They've been talking about doing investigation missions for since like 2020, for like 5 years. But we've got a few updates and snippets here and there, but we've never seen them go full bore on what those missions are going to be, or even putting in experimental versions in the pack the stuff. Which, in theory, if you're looking at investigations, that should involve reading, observation, and so it should involve some world building as part of that mission design. But we've not seen any of that. So possibly this is the year for that, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching so far. Make sure you check out the Info Runners. Make sure you check out Jail's channel on YouTube and Matt's YouTube. All of those are linked in the description below. And if you did enjoy this, make sure you join us live at twitch.tv/theastropub and youtube.com/theastropub live on Saturdays starting at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific. We'd love to have you come on and join us live. We're going to be heading into the question and answer session, the After Dark session, and those where chat's going to ask questions. We'll do our best to answer them. If you did enjoy this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe on YouTube for more content, and hit the bell icon to be notified when these release. Especially if you're watching this on the YouTube, the recorded YouTube afterwards, make sure you subscribe to at the Captain's Table podcast, so that that's where all these are going to live in the future. And of course, subscribe to us on Spotify and leave us a rating, leave us a comment. Those all to help push us up in the algorithm a little bit more, to help more people discover this, and hopefully a little bit less bandwidth intensive for those of you who are listening to this in the car or at work or anything else like that. Thank you for watching, and like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black.